From the very beginning, we have always sought to reach out to one another, and storytellers found a new forum for personal expression. Wondrous new tools will help us learn to bridge the gaps between us.
Good morrow, nerds. My name is Az. Welcome to this. Today I'm going to be brutally honest about something that may upset people in a way that we have not seen since I ate a chip on camera in 2018. Oh boy. But I think it's a discussion very worth having. So, to the wolves. When you have ADHD, Dungeons & Dragons, everything from the culture to the structure of the game itself, sucks really bad. Uh-oh. This might be a surprise to some of you who know that I'm on a D&D podcast where I play a pirate twink named Galway Girl with people that I adore. So let me clarify that the reason I feel that I can be honest about this is because I'm playing that game with those wonderful people and one of the most conscientious, thoughtful DMs I've ever encountered in a space that's made more effort to include me than any space before it that I've played in. I love playing Realms with them, whereas I didn't like tabletop role-playing at all, really, or even board games beforehand. And that's kind of the point. That's the difference that accommodations, awareness, inclusivity can make. So Dungeon Masters, players, consumers of podcasts and episodic D&D content, listen up, this is for you too, whether you have ADHD or not. I'm here to explain some of the challenges that I've faced in D&D because of my ADHD, so that maybe we can be more aware and other ADHD people can find their fun. Slight disclaimer here, I am mostly referring to D&D. I haven't played that many other systems, but I will say that of all of the ones I have played, D&D is definitely the most ADHD hostile. I was just going to say ADHD unfriendly, but that just doesn't seem to cut it. So here we are. There are no blanket solutions, and you can take everything I say here as guidelines. They're not all going to apply to everybody. I have researched it very intensely over the years because I personally try to manage mine without medication, so it's do or die. But I am not a substitute for talking to the ADHD people in your life. I work for ADHD, but I do not speak for the brand of the company. Moving on. I'm going to explain some symptoms and side effects of ADHD that I have experienced personally interacting with D&D, and workarounds, if I have them. Which gives me an opportunity to rave about my DM in my group, and I'm very excited. Though be prepared, non-ADHD havers, sometimes my advice is just going to be patience and understanding, because you can't work around everything. But we'll do what we can, and I think that some awareness can make possibly the largest tabletop role-playing game in the world a little more accessible, so probably worth doing. One of the big symptoms of ADHD is difficulty with invisible information. This comes up a lot, so I'm going to explain it as best I can. It has to do with our object permanence. We need things to be visual, in front of us, touchable if possible, and somehow for it not to blend in with the background over time. Otherwise, it can just go away, like our car keys or our self-worth. This is why we leave cabinets and drawers open. This is why we often have clutter. Clutter is a way for us to see our resources so that we can actually use them. Oh my god, no more. I'm not a hoods person or a hat person. Sorry, I will never be a pirate captain. I will be a cabin boy for the rest of my life. That's fine. I think this is a big part of the reason why I got into LARP years before I ever set foot near a D&D table. Usually in LARP, everything that can be physical is. I like to touch things. I'm asexual. If you make any weird jokes, I'm calling glad. One effect this symptom has for me in tabletop role-playing games is severe difficulty with things like puzzles. You know, those things in every single dungeon or surrounding every single important artifact. Unscrambling information, period, is its own symptom with ADHD. Unscrambling invisible information is tear-inducing for me. Literally, I have cried over puzzles. But it also just makes it harder to understand the game world as a whole. Everything about gameplay being pretty much invisible makes what I like to call fact soup. Like alphabet soup, except for things that you need to function. Wow. Even roleplay interactions, especially with NPCs, can be harder because nothing is attached to anything. We're expected to be able to recall countless invisible details in order to be able to interact with the story. Names of faces you can't see, buildings and cities you've never been in, and times and dates that you've never lived through. Attempting to engage with all of this and keep it straight in my mind makes me feel borderline delirious. And no, simply writing it down is not a solution. If you've ever told an ADHD person to just make lists, you owe them $10. Go on. I'm sure their links are in their bios at this point. Physical representations, visuals, and sometimes images anchor concepts in an ADHD mind. Without those anchors, all of that information is just floating in our brains with no way for us to tether it. We need those physical representations to access the information. Some things that help with this are, of course, maps, figurines, art of people and places. Small props that you can interact with, like potion bottles, wanted posters, coins, pouches, letters, journals, things like that. Some kind of representation of your gear, even if it's just a token. The great thing about that is that we ADHD people can do some of that ourselves, and we often instinctually do. I have started making an in-character journal for Calder, not full of names and dates, but full of pictures that he would have drawn himself, kind of like an in-character scrapbook. Here we have his dead parents. Now, Nox, my DM and actual sorcerer on Earth, has put in a ton of effort to creating visuals, soundscapes, voices, adding a physicality to this world, even though we all play virtually. Momo O'Brien, artist, cottage princess, YouTuber, dear friend, and producer of Realms Apart, commissioned art of all of our characters and even some of Nox's incredible NPCs. She also creates these shadow puppet visuals and soundscapes that help me keep it tethered when I rewatch the show. Also, having the sessions recorded does actually help immensely when I can get over my reluctance to perceive myself. Another thing that may be a little more controversial, I guess, is that Nox has accommodated me when the challenges are stacked against my brain type. That means that sometimes he does appear to make things easier for me, although we understand that what he's actually doing is leveling the playing field so that I am not set up to fail just because I have a different brain type. Saying I have a different brain type makes it sound like a cute little quirk, actually, and I don't know how to impart how critical this is. ADHD people's nervous system literally operates differently. It's called an interest-based nervous system. So when we say we're wired differently, I cannot stress how much we're not joking. An example of what Nox has done for me would be that during a challenge there was a door that desperately needed opening. My character, Cal, was the only character physically available to go and even try. But there was a puzzle to open the door, some kind of complicated thing with levers. Oh no. Because I had Busby with me, Busby is our artificer's pet robotic bird, you know, he let Busby help Cal and literally show him which levers to pull, allowing Cal to make strength checks instead of whatever the hell else I would have been doing. I could go on about how masterful, artful, and thoughtful Nox is as a DM all day, and to some extent I probably will, but for now I'll just say that adaptions like that completely make or break an experience for me. Neurodivergent folks can spend a lot of their life being made to feel worthless by societal norms and other people for not being able to do simple things the normal way. So it means an awful lot to have some freedom from the constant shame and failure of being stuffed into boxes that were never the right shape for me in the first place. So to sum it up, to help with invisible information, we need visual, physical representations whenever possible, and sometimes forgiveness on certain challenges. If you want to be inclusive, you have to really rethink the idea of it's supposed to be hard to be fun. Because what's hard is completely subjective. What's challenging and creates a great payoff for you may be a complete deal breaker that only is a setup for shame and failure for other types of people. And it's not going to be because they're lazy, it's not going to be because they're dumb or scatterbrained or because they don't care enough. It's going to be because they engage with and store information fundamentally differently than you might. If you want to take it a step further, consider asking people at your table what they're good at and incorporating that when you can. For instance, you may find out that a person can't do numbers for whatever reason, but you may find out that they have an excellent memory for color. You could do some really interesting and fresh things with that. And taking that approach will help everyone at the table, not just your neurodivergent people. Working memory. That's the kind of memory that lets us keep track of things like where our car keys are, shopping lists, appointments for that day, that thing that someone just told us to go and get from the other room. Basically lists of temporary information that we need to function on a day-to-day basis. This is commonly severely impaired in people with ADHD. It is not a forgetfulness issue, it is an object permanence issue, and it can severely kneecap our functionality. And with that in mind, let's talk about D&D mechanics. The functionality of the game, the system by which you use your abilities to affect the world. In D&D, this relies almost completely on working memory. That's knowing what spells you've prepared, what they do and their limitations, what abilities you've bought, what of this you've already used up, what equipment you have, whether or not you have any money, rules that are specific to environments or situations. Oh. The name of the organization you're investigating, the name of the NPCs you're talking to, clues for a puzzle that you're trying to solve. It goes on and on and on. All of these and so many more things are functions of working memory. So if it's beginning to sound like playing D&D with ADHD is a lot, yes. Yeah. Yes. So if you have ADHD and you've been playing and just trying to muscle through without any accommodations, wow. How are you? You deserve a pat on the back. Someone should order you some donuts. There are, of course, character sheets and organizational paper materials to help you keep track of this stuff. And when I say you, I mean not me. I mean neurotypical people, not people with ADHD. Those things are just blocks of text and numbers. You know what that looks like to me, to my brain? Alphabet soup. Yeah, wow. Large blocks of information quickly just become a brick wall. I look at those sheets and I feel the same fear that I feel when I try to navigate a government website or do my taxes, things that I have yet to do without crying. So, some things that have helped me. First of all, I'm not sure I've ever made my own D&D character, certainly not without help. There has never been a shortage of people who are extremely enthusiastic about D&D who will help you build a character. Bless you people, doing the Lord's work. Thank you. Websites and softwares like D&D Beyond and Roll20 are actually incredible accessibility tools. Mostly, though, if someone else sets them up for you. However, Nox, our DM for Realms Apart, set ours up for us, and it has saved my whole life. No more gladiatorial math, no more guessing which dice to roll, no guessing what effects stuff has on you. Those two tools function as workarounds for probably the biggest roadblocks from D&D, for me. Another thing that's helped me immensely again is physical representations of things that I have and things that I can do. I have some prop coins that I keep near me during game now that represent my uses of an ability called Luck, which allows me to re-roll certain dice rolls. I could never remember that I had the ability at all, even when it would have saved my whole ass, let alone how many uses of it I had left before I started using those coins. Even though those websites have checkboxes that you can tick off when you use those abilities. It had to be physical. Other things I've seen are people putting little dice in bottles to represent health potions that you just uncork and roll. Amazing. I found out that there are tiny dry erase spell cards that you can put in tiny spell books to represent your prepared spells. I love it when things are tiny. I actually made this little spell book in an unrelated fit of quarantine madness, you know, when you go a little nuts and you teach yourself to bookbind. I've actually been using it as an album for my vintage Hook trading cards because I'm that nerd. But there are tiny little leather-bound books just for this that I think you can even get on Amazon. A cool thing about D&D is that it's been around so long and it's so popular that people have been coming up with solutions like this for a while. Another thing that's helped me, that my DM has done for me during the actual game, is reminding me of my options, perhaps making them a little more clear than they otherwise might be. And if your hackles are already up because you think that people shouldn't be making games easy, you think that they should be challenging to be fun, consider that this is a compensation for a cognitive function that is necessary to play this game that I do not have. And no matter how hard I try, I will not just get it eventually. I cannot cure this with hard work or caring enough or whatever. I have to work around it. Similar to the way a colorblind person would not be able to see the color they were blind to just from trying harder. And it would be ridiculous to ask that of them, right? Right. My DM, Nox, also focuses way more on storytelling and less on rules and mechanics, which I vastly prefer. The parts of the game that are less accessible to me are minimized. I play these games to tell stories, explore some worlds, and have meaningful experiences with people that I enjoy. I don't know if it's an ADHD thing to be more focused on the story than the logistics. That could just be my personality, but that's what I'm interested in. Boredom, or as it's more kindly known, understimulation. So while we don't know exactly what causes a person to have ADHD, people with ADHD have been observed to have less dopamine in their nervous systems than someone without it might. So we have what's called an interest-based nervous system, and we engage with things that give us that dopamine. Though I don't like to use the word interesting to describe what I can interact with, because I don't think that's fair. It is a maddeningly unhelpful interpretation of what's actually going on. I don't want people to feel like they're boring if I can't focus, because that's just not true. And that perception also causes people to take it personally when ADHD people struggle, and then they lash out, and that's also not fair. So I use the words engaging or stimulating, because for me there needs to be interaction. A story can be artful and absolutely gripping, but if I just have to sit still and listen to it for extended periods of time, I'm gonna miss it. There needs to be an interactivity or an exchange of some kind. Otherwise, you know those movies where somebody gets cursed to be trapped in an inanimate object for all eternity, and there's a slow close-up of them screaming and their eyes are looking around, but it's the object's eyes? Yeah, it feels like that. Understimulation feels like that, except that happens within minutes. If that sounds like a lot to you, imagine what it's like living it. Whew. It is kind of torturous because our happy reward chemicals are not on the same base level as everyone else's. That's why ADHD people tend to multitask. That's why we fidget. That's why we draw in class. There's even a sort of mysterious symptom that's only just starting to be studied. It's called intrusive sleep, which seems bafflingly like narcolepsy, but it isn't narcolepsy. It is a sleepiness that overtakes ADHD people when they attempt to do a sustained attention task that is understimulating. I have said for years that my brain puts me to sleep as a defense mechanism whenever I try to study math. People thought I was joking. Was not. And this is just to give you an idea of the physiological level that we're on here. So I can personally guarantee that if I'm in a group of people and we all look like we're paying attention, everyone else can be retaining everything, but I am either mentally absent or literally shutting down. So, how this applies to D&D. D&D can often be inherently engaging, especially during roleplay scenarios where the entire party is in the same space. All of the information around you is relevant and potentially interactable. Even if your character is just sitting there reacting emotionally, that's still some form of engagement. However, that can be interspersed with long periods where you're expected to pay attention without even the possibility of being able to interact or engage with anything at all. Like combat, or if the party splits up, where you have to basically take turns before your character can exist again. And that's just how it has to be. DMs can't be in multiple places at once, and we just have to deal with that. However, ADHD people do need to find other ways to create that stimulation so that we can stay on Earth and not suffer. And that part is sort of antithetical to the cultural etiquette of D&D. I've been in role-playing spaces run weirdly similar to an old-fashioned classroom. You know, no phones, eyes forward, keep still, no drawing, no food, no breaks, so on. I'm gonna tell you right now, for many people with ADHD, none of those are gonna work out. Nope. This is part of the reason I'm always snacking or drawing or doing something with my hands on Realms Apart. Sometimes I'm even on my phone. It's actually an attempt to keep my dopamine levels on par with everyone else's so that I can stay grounded for this story that everyone's put so much work into. The Realm Squad has been incredible about this with me. No judgment, they've all been very compassionate and understanding. I have gotten some comments from people outside of the group, however, kind of snarky about how I'm so entertaining to watch when I'm paying attention. Those comments are frustrating for me, because I am listening. It's that my listening doesn't look like yours, and that's gonna have to be okay in order for me to be included. And it also means that if any other part of my ADHD contributes to me not understanding what's going on, it gets attributed to me not listening and not caring enough, and more of that same. Let's just not. And those comments may not seem like a big deal, but a lifetime of constant needling shame like that really does do a number on your self-worth and your mental health. Oh man. So as far as being inclusive and welcoming goes, a big thing is just not reinforcing that shame. Nobody should be expected to hold an ADHD person's full attention and engagement all the time. That would be something I would only assign if I were a vengeful Greek god. No. But when we find our own ways of making our experience engaging, as long as we're not interrupting, steamrolling a situation, taking up all the space in a room, just let us fidget, let us snack, let us do our weird little tasks. Don't ban phones. Unless we explicitly say it's okay, don't make snarky comments about our attention span. Don't roll your eyes or belittle us or shame us when we still sometimes need information repeated. That's going to happen regardless. It's a disability. I am so lucky in that the Realms Apart squad has been incredible about this. I've been able to just exist and do what I need to do without being shamed more for it, and I want that for other ADHD people as well. Interrupting. There are some facets to this. I'm not talking about the interrupting that happens accidentally or when there's something urgent that needs to be communicated immediately. I mean true interjecting, talking over someone, and essentially steamrolling a situation. I know that can be a character choice, and it can also be a cultural thing. It depends on the dynamic of the table, and as long as you're paying attention to that dynamic, that's fine. If you're in a group where that's a sign of active engagement, more power to you. However, in my experience as a person with ADHD, being interrupted and derailed is extremely frustrating because it takes so much for us to focus and gather our thoughts in the first place. And emotional dysregulation, another common symptom of ADHD, can mean that it's easy for us to get flooded with that frustration or even hurt in those moments. And while I don't condone lashing out because of those feelings, they do feel justified. Imagine that everyone around you is standing on solid ground, but you are standing on a large, poorly filled waterbed. You're struggling, you're sinking, every little disturbance makes it even worse, and despite that, you manage to stand up straight with everyone else for a moment. And in that moment, somebody comes up to you and shoves you down. For me, being interrupted feels like that. So I'm not saying you can never have a dramatic moment where you interrupt somebody, or that you should let anyone go on and hold people verbally hostage. But when reasonable and possible, give us a breath to finish what we're doing. Otherwise, we may never be able to start it back up again. For us, ideas and tasks can have a very limited window of opportunity to escape our minds. So just keep in mind when you might be making that harder. On the flip side, sometimes people with ADHD can be chronic interrupters. There are a lot of neurodivergences that cause you to be more prone to interrupting like that. My opinion on that may not be super popular, but I think that when possible, that is a symptom that we should work to manage in ourselves. When possible. While it is harder for us sometimes, we're still responsible for our actions. It's a good idea to find another place to put that energy. Another thing, rejection sensitivity dysphoria means that being told to shut up, essentially, is a little bit devastating. So whether you are the ADHD haver or not, whether you are the interrupter or not, I think everyone in those situations deserves a little patience and kindness while still remaining firm in our boundaries. I think that's fair to say. Math. Oh, math. ADHD and math struggles are not inherently related at all. Many ADHD people are incredible at maths and sciences. However, if you do have ADHD and you struggle with math, boy, is it a struggle. Our ability to manage time and formulate plans and execute them in order is uncooperative. Doing math in your head, unscrambling invisible information. There are neurodivergences like dyscalculia that are often comorbid with ADHD that specifically inhibit your ability to interact with numbers. So we do not always struggle, but when we do struggle, oh my God. And it's more likely that we will have trauma related to that struggle. You would not believe, or maybe you would, the level of worthlessness that can be ingrained in a person over things like this. And again, it has nothing to do with how much we care or how hard we try. So if I hear of anyone making fun of ADHD people, or judging them, or even being a little bit condescending about making mistakes like this, I'm gonna come over there, I'm gonna... Thinking out of the box. ADHD people tend to be pretty great creative thinkers. We tend to have a good ability to use what's in front of us in effective and sometimes inventive ways. I think of it as the flip side of the invisible information struggle. When we can actually survey our resources, we tend to do very well. Our sense of time and the proper order or the right way of doing things is pretty nebulous a lot of the time, which also means that those things don't limit us quite so much. In other words, we think outside of the box because we tend to struggle with the concept of the box in the first place. This is good to keep in mind when you're playing D&D, because that means it can be more important than ever to be open to creative problem solving at your table. The more static your requirements are for resolving an encounter, the more likely you are to be frustrated. And that can be true of any table. It can be the mark of a good DM that they're able to roll with the creative solutions of their players. It's just kicked up a notch when you have ADHD people at the table. Hydrating and keeping blood sugar from dropping. Blood sugar levels and hydration both affect cognitive functioning, which is something that ADHD people in particular really don't need impaired. Low blood sugar can also cause panic attacks and more emotional dysregulation, which again, we're probably going to be a little bit more susceptible to the effects of hunger and thirst and even lack of sleep for similar reasons. So I'm just going to reiterate, let ADHD people snack. Let everybody snack, really. Don't ask if a person has anything that makes it necessary for them to snack. Don't create a snack hostile environment, please. That's messed up for a lot of reasons. Find quiet snacks if you can. Mute yourself while you're chewing, if that's an option. If you're recording sessions, provide captions so that people can watch and avoid triggers if they have sensory processing issues. But we will not be shaming anyone for eating at any time. So if I see anybody shaming anybody else for eating food, it'll be pancakes for you. On the house. I think I'm clever. Taking breaks. No matter what, doing one sustained attention task for many hours will eventually trigger that trapped in a cursed object feeling. Unless we're hyper-focusing, which is something we have very little, if any, control over. ADHD people need more breaks from sustained attention tasks than neurotypical people do. If you've gotten what people are calling Zoom fatigue, which is focus fatigue, that is what ADHD people feel much faster than other people might. It takes a lot of brain beans to participate in these things, and the longer you go without a break, the more beans each thing costs, which can cause us to burn out completely on a task exponentially more quickly than our neurotypical peers might. Very generally speaking, according to Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the leading minds in the treatment of ADHD, if a neurotypical person needs a 5-minute break every 20 minutes, an ADHD person will need a 3-minute break every 10. So whenever possible, try to adjust your break schedule accordingly. I promise it will help. Bullet points. So whenever possible, don't monologue at ADHD people. Generally speaking, if you would like to give the information its best chance of sticking. I touched on it earlier, but large blocks of information very easily become an insurmountable brick wall, emotionally and intellectually very overwhelming. So it's a good idea to break up information that you want us to either interact with or remember and give it to us one bullet point at a time. Otherwise, we may just not be able to keep track. So if you watch Realms Apart, the D&D podcast that I'm on, you might notice that whenever I'm given multiple bits of information to interact with at once, like say a piece of a backstory, something emotional, and then maybe I'm immediately asked a question, I freeze up, say something a bit panicky, and then I only interact with one piece of information that I was given, usually the last thing that was said to me, no matter what the other things were. Because of impaired working memory, I just cannot keep a list in my mind. Which means I can't go through the mental process in my head of saying, well, let me address that backstory information they just gave me, and then let me offer to help with that emotional thing they just said, and then let me answer their question. I can't do that. All but one of those things is going to fall right out. Like my brain is a colander. And for me, that always sucks so much because it doesn't matter how important those other things might have been. I'm gonna miss out. It also makes me feel like a selfish role player when I can't pick up what other people are putting down, when I can't interact with something that they've told me about themselves because it was one of the things that fell out. But I promise it's not because I don't care, it's because I can't keep a list in my mind. So whenever possible, just try not to give us lists. Object permanence and accessories or effects, another little side effect of one of the unholy trinity symptoms. If a character has something that the player does not have, or does not have a physical representation for, like a robotic arm, a glowing hat, a backpack, a familiar. If something happens to the character that changes their physical appearance temporarily. Because it's D&D, it's all invisible information, that pairs with our object permanence to make it incredibly difficult to stick in our brains. Especially when it's our own character. When other people have these things, and it's up to them to remind us that they exist, it's not foolproof, but that definitely helps. But when it's up to us to keep a temporary, invisible thing in our minds, oh no. When I have familiars in tabletop games, they often disappear for extremely long periods of time, unless I literally have a stuffed animal. Reminders of these things are extremely helpful, as long as they're not belittling or embarrassing or condescending. With these things, patience is key, and I am incredibly lucky on Realms Apart in that I don't think a single person at that table has made me feel bad once about this. Which is great, because this object permanence issue does not mean that we're airheaded or careless. ADHD presents a little differently in every person, so the crucial takeaway here is to ask your ADHD person how to help and what they need as an individual. And fellow ADHD people, I'm hoping this video can give you a starting point or at least some vocabulary so that you can speak up and ask for what you need. I know it can be hard. Before Realms Apart, I had never really been in a space where D&D accessibility for me was an actual priority. It took me a long time to put words to this because I had always been in survival mode. I never thought about what would actually make it fun. If you're an ADHD person that's been able to find your fun and functionality at a D&D table, I would love to hear what's worked for you. Maybe if you leave a comment, non-ADHD havers and ADHD havers alike can browse. I'm excited about playing Calder Grail like I have not been excited about an RPG character since I started LARPing, I think in 2013. Yeah. Tabletop role-playing has the potential to be one of the most accessible forms of play, period, and that's powerful. I've done a couple videos about this already in the before times, but role-playing or playing pretend can be hugely beneficial to things like mental health, building social skills like empathy, teamwork, leadership ability, and creative thinking. And this is a little touchy, but it can also help people find new communities that are uncoupled from things like religion or political ideology. And that's incredibly important if those things have been harmful to them. So making D&D and tabletop role-playing more accessible is not only something that's very possible, but very worth doing. Hello adventurers, thank you for watching Whatever This Is. If you like Whatever This Is and you want to support it, you can join the Adventuring Party on Patreon. It is an ever-changing grab bag of content because I have ADHD. Have I mentioned that? But either way, thank you for being here. Keep being magical. I'll see you somewhere in the multiverse. All right. Look like a lost 12-year-old. It's spring. Jesus. I don't know. I can't even see the soup. I'm in a bowl of soup. Larp, usually... my voice is cracking like a little teenage boy. Oh. If I move around. Even when my favorite movies on the planet are playing. Planet. Treasure Planet. Ugh. Even when my hair fluff has to be right, that's all I've got.